Listen, because news is written and produced by Shannon Higgins, Gavin Crawford, Phil Lung, and Jess Klobowski. This week, they had help from Chris Siddiqui and Jacob Duarte. Rounding out the team, Aaron Conway, Bronwyn Page, Errol Gonsalves, Diana Marcoulin, and our recording engineer, Paul Hodge.
This is CBC Radio 1, 990 AM, 89.3 FM in Winnipeg.
Hi, I'm Saroja Coelho, host of the Saturday afternoon call-in show, Just Asking.
And I'm Ian Hannamansing, host of the Sunday afternoon call-in show, Cross Country Checkup.
Whether it's world events
or what's happening in your backyard,
every weekend we connect Canada live.
That's Just Asking with Saroja Coelho, Saturday afternoons at 4 Eastern.
And Cross Country Checkup with Ian Hannamansing, Sunday afternoons at 4 Eastern on CBC Radio 1.
You know the feeling of finding a really good podcast? Or the feeling of someone always being there, like your favorite radio show? Stream CBC Podcasts, CBC Music, and CBC Radio anytime, anywhere. Download the CBC Listen app for free.
This is CBC News. Good afternoon, I'm Rosanna Hempel. At 12 o'clock, it's 9 in Winnipeg. A mix of sun and cloud today, a high of 15. Awarding one of Manitoba's highest honors to a group of heroes. The Order of the Buffalo Hunt has been awarded to a group of first responders who were on the scene of a fiery bus crash near Carberry on June 15th last year. 134 first responders were recognized. They're members from the Carberry North Cypress Langford Fire Department, Brandon Fire, Neepawa Volunteer Fire Department, STARS Air Ambulance, RCMP, and Shared Health Emergency Response Services. Premier Wab Kinew says the idea came to him while at a memorial for the 17 people who died in the bus crash.
This is a room full of heroes. I mean that with the utmost of sincerity. Me and the rest of the people of this province stand in awe of what you do on a given day. And this is our turn to say thank you.
Kinew says it's important to recognize those who run towards trouble when most people run away. 2 teens and a 12-year-old face charges after a senior was shot in the head with a BB gun. Winnipeg police say it happened around midnight near Hargrave and Portage. A man in his 70s was just leaving a restaurant when he was shot. He was taken to hospital in unstable condition, but has since improved to stable. People who saw what happened gave police a description of the kids. The 2 boys and a girl are now in custody. Investigators believe the suspects had been randomly shooting, and additional victims still have to be identified. Manitobans are visiting food banks in increasing numbers. A new report by Food Banks Canada says 2024 saw record numbers of people accessing food banks across Canada. Vince Barletta at Harvest Manitoba says it's distressing.
We've been seeing very similar trends here in Winnipeg and across the province of Manitoba. Now well over 50,000 Manitobans a month visiting a food bank somewhere across Manitoba, and seeing these numbers now for the first time topping 2 million monthly visits to a food bank across Canada. It's just astonishing.
Barletta says in this province between March of 2020 and this year, the number of visits to food banks has increased by 122%. He's calling on governments to provide more affordable housing, a grocery benefit for low-income earners, and improved services for northern and remote First Nations. A Winnipeg man who came to Canada to escape violence in Brazil is shaken after being attacked with a machete and robbed. Ariel Martez says in his 6 years in this city, he's never experienced anything like it. He was returning home after work around midnight on October 11th. When he was approached by 2 men as he got off the bus near Roach and Helmsdale. He says they demanded his things. One had a gun. When he turned over his AirPods and phone, one of the robbers attacked him with a machete. Martez needed surgery to repair tendons in his arm and a gash in his leg.
I'm probably not going to be able to work as a server anymore. I've been working as a server for almost 3 to 4 years. It was my bread and butter. I'm probably not going to be able to do for a good while.
Winnipeg police say Major Crimes is investigating and no arrests have been made. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre says if his party wins the next election, it will scrap the federal sales tax on new homes selling for less than $1 million. Poilievre says the tax cut would trim as much as $40,000 off the price of an $800,000 home.
Getting rid of the GST on new home builds will stimulate 30,000 additional homes built every single year, which incidentally will actually generate more income tax revenue for the government without raising rates. That will help cover the cost of the tax cut.
He says he would pay for the tax cut by scrapping the Liberals' housing policy. That policy includes a housing accelerator fund, which offers funding to municipalities that adjust regulations that are considered barriers to new construction. Many pollsters have identified housing as a key issue heading into next federal election campaign. The Canadian Medical Association wants to do away with sick notes when it comes to short-term minor illnesses. The group says the change would reduce unnecessary paperwork for doctors. Jennifer Yoon has more.
Sick notes for short-term minor illnesses like the common cold, gastroenteritis, and migraines. The Canadian Medical Association says they take up too much time. Dr. Joss Reimer, the current president of the CMA, says abolishing them could free up millions of appointments a year.
There's 6.5 million Canadians who don't have access to a family doctor. So if we're talking about 5 million visits a year being opened up.
Some provinces have already taken the step. In 2023, Nova Scotia passed a law saying employers cannot request a sick note for an absence fewer than 5 working days. Quebec also passed a bill earlier this month banning sick notes for absences fewer than 3 days. The CMA is calling on other jurisdictions to follow suit, so family doctors who are already stretched thin can focus on patient care. Jennifer Yoon, CBC News, Toronto.
And that is the CBC News from Winnipeg. Your next local CBC News is at 12:30.
Good afternoon and welcome to Radio Noon. I'm Laurie Hoogstraten. Looks like a beautiful Monday in October. It's the 28th and we're looking for high temperatures of 15 degrees. Coming up on the show today, crimes against Manitoba businesses are on the rise. This past year, more than half of Manitoba businesses say they've been targeted in the past year. So coming up on our call-in conversation, have you been affected by business or property crime? What do you think needs to happen to reverse the trend of rising crime? Give us a call with what you've seen and felt, 204-780-0893. In a while, we're going to Lac de Bonnie's Community Garden to see what's going on there. But first up, Food Bank Canada's annual report is just out, and the news is not good. We'll go to Brandon. Canadians struggle to make ends meet, and it's continuing. And now more and more people are using food banks to put meals on the table. That's according to the just-released Food Banks Canada annual report. What's contributing to the rise in use, and what steps can be taken to turn things around? For some insight into the situation here in Manitoba, we're joined by Barbara McNish, Executive Director of Samaritan House Ministries in Brandon. Hi, Barbara.
Hi, how are you?
I'm well. How are you?
We're doing okay. As every day busy.
As every day busy, exactly. So, you have a large food bank in your area there. So, what stands out for you in this report?
I just think the constant rise of the numbers, they keep going up. I mean, we've seen it every year, and our data shows that as well.
And so were there any surprises in the report, or did it just confirm what you've been observing?
No, it kind of confirms what we've been observing, because even if we look at our numbers in Brandon, last year and this year combined, we had 1,995 new users that have never used the food bank before or returning after not using it for a number of years. And And of that number, we have 3,377 households that we have that get a hamper once a month, or maybe they might come once every 3 months, but we have a total of 3,377 households. Of that, 40% are children. So it really just reflects the report that came out.
And what are these returning users or new users? What are they telling you? What's the story from them?
Well, if you think about it, inflation, the cost of affordable rental units, or even no rental units available so that you can find a affordable one. Many are working part-time, 2 or 3 jobs to make ends meet. Minimum wage has gone up, of course, and that has been one step kind of in the right direction. But balancing that with inflation and the cost of living with the minimum wage. And so people are just struggling.
So how are you managing this in terms of distribution? Have you got new sponsors? Are you divvying things up differently? Are you limiting what people have? Or what's going on in that sector?
We went to a shopping model in July of 2022. And we have items that people can pick. So whether that's your beans and your pasta sauce, rice, KD, we have dropped KD down from 2 to 1 package. And so we are not necessarily a grocery store, even though our shelves are looking like a grocery store. We're not a grocery store. We're helping people get through a few days till next payday. But unfortunately, the need is so high, people are not managing that. Like, they're unable to manage it. They're paying their rent and making sure that they have a safe and warm place to be. And so the food is probably one of the last items that they buy, or they learn to figure out where to buy it cheaper, because it's not cheap out there. We see inflation rising in the cost of food. So when we went to the shopping model, we have cut back. Usually, sometimes we're maybe doing 12 to 15 items. I think now we're doing 8. Mm-hmm. I mean, if we have it, we will put it out. But if we don't have, we can't give.
And what do people tell you about how they have to prioritize what money they have? Like, where does putting food on the table come when you need to keep a roof over your head, that sort of thing?
Well, and that's exactly the truth. So they need to put a roof over their head, and they've got children, so they want to make sure that the children have a place to stay as well. And so people are, they may need to use a bus pass or gas to get to work. So yes, prioritizing what's really important, and then learning to shop places like the dollar store or food rescue stores or food banks, or wherever they can find that cheaper way of buying food.
You mentioned that raising the minimum wage has been a bit of a help. Are there other measures currently in place, or ones that you think are coming along that might help with the situation?
Well, it's the situations are also differently for everyone. Like people are needing more full-time or constant work, because sometimes people are saying, you know what, I got a job and I'm working 3 or 4 months. So I think a constant income, I think, is important. And so if that means part of minimum wage going up, learning how to, a lot of people garden. Like at Samaritan House, we have a garden, and not only do we have a garden for Samaritan House, but people garden. And so during the summer, we get a lot of produce that comes in from farmers and our Hutterite colonies and different people, gardeners that just bring it. And so we've got fruit and vegetables all through the summertime, and people are also gardening and doing that. So that's another way that you can help support, our fresh vegetables and fruit. But in the winter, you don't have that option, right? So, our fresh veggies and fruit is down. So I think it's hard because there's so many factors. Maybe finding some place where you can there is supportive housing with some finances out there. And like I said, there are some things that are happening, but really the lack of housing or affordable housing is probably one of the key factors.
Yeah. I think you've raised many points here, but if you had just the ear of the powers that be right now, what would your main message be in terms of helping the people in your community?
Well, and I think we do have the ears of the powers to be to a certain degree because working where we work in a social service industry where it's not only a food bank, we also have the Safe and Warm Shelter, as you well know. The powers to be are hearing, and I think they're trying to come to do the things that they need to do. I think it takes time. I think that there's a lot of factors that you need to that need to be considered. And yes, I'm not sure what the answer is. I know going forward we need to make sure that people are being fed, especially children. Like I said, in Brandon we have 40% food bank users that are children and 12% are seniors. So it's just a way of, I don't know, can we get more housing out there that's affordable? When I talk about affordable, I'm talking about that it has to match their income. You know what I mean? Because sometimes when people are paying rent, they can't afford $1,500 or $1,800 or what people would say is affordable rent. But at the same time, how can we match that with landlords that also need some repairs and things? So there's just a lot of situations where how can we help everyone and find a happy medium that we can support everyone?
Well, Barbara, thank you very much for your insights. You've given us lots to think about and, of course, talk about. Thanks for being with us on Radio Noon.
Well, thanks for having us and have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye. Barbara McNish is the Executive Director of Brandon's Samaritan House.
Your local news at your fingertips.
CBC News has a local news app made for your phone or tablet.
So don't waste time scrolling for the local stories you want. Just download the app to get the information that matters to you, when it happens,
and how you want it.
Another way to get your local news. The CBC News app. Download it today.
It is just coming up to 16 minutes after 12 o'clock. I'm Laurie Hoogstraten. You're listening to Radio Noon. And coming up in the call-in portion of the program after the 12:30 news, whether it's shoplifting, vandalism, drug paraphernalia, or piles of garbage, more than half of Manitoba businesses have been hit hard by property crime. So coming up on our call-in conversation, we want to know, what do you think needs to happen to change this? How do we reverse the trend? What's the effect being on customers and on you in the community? Tell us what's going on in your neighborhood. 204-780-0893, or you can text it 204-588-7855. And in just a few minutes, how one community is making a difference helping to feed families in Lac du Bonnet. We'll hear about some volunteer gardeners there, how they're working hard with a garden to food bank model. And taking a look at Riley's forecast, mostly sunny today, bit breezy across the south. Hudson Bay coast could see 2 to 4 centimeters of snow throughout the day. That'll be ending tonight, and a risk of freezing rain in the north with temperatures close to freezing. Should go up to 15 in Winnipeg today, though. Some temperatures for you. In Brandon, it's 7, Churchill -1, Dauphin is 10, Gimli is 8, The Paw is 6, in Thompson it's 2, and in Winnipeg at this hour, we're not at 15 yet, 9 degrees in Winnipeg. Lac du Bonnet's community garden grows a lot of produce. This year alone, it's generated close to 1,000 kilograms going directly to the local food bank. The land was donated by a local farmer, and water is piped in from the town and from the RM. Leslie Wakeman is a founding member of Lac du Bonnet's Community Garden Committee, and CBC's Emily Brass first asked her how the garden came about.
The gardens grew out of our food security network. Heroes Alliance is a local nonprofit that addresses food security issues as well as mental health in the community. So 4 years ago, we thought we really need to have a community garden. So a small group of us, Reva Karklin and myself, headed up a team of people to do a pilot project. After that pilot project with 13 gardens, we got a lot of positive feedback in cooperation with Macintosh Farms, who have donated the land for us. We started our permanent garden site here. So we grew from 13 to 20 some odd plots, and the third year with 27 or 28 plots. And this year we had over 52 plots in the garden. We know that national standards are that 1 in 7 people are living with food security issues and using food banks. And in our own community, we reflect the same national statistics. So we knew that if we could do something, that this was a pocket or an area that we could grow some food security. In fact, our food bank has 3 plots in the garden and grew over 1,600 pounds of produce that was distributed to clients of the food bank this year. So we were doing some math and we figured that, over 50 plots this year, if we can grow to 70, which we may very well grow to next year, we'd be putting probably close to 18,000 pounds of fresh produce into our community. And that helps to offset grocery bills or, create equity in terms of access to healthy food for people in our community. When you go to the food bank, we know that there are a lot of carbohydrates and a lot of processed foods, because it needs to be something that can stand for a long time, right? And even in our stores, when we're shopping, there's a lot of food that's been shipped from other countries. We don't know what chemicals are on them. The cost of produce is exorbitant, especially midwinter. So if we can grow our own produce, learn to preserve it or freeze it, it can sort of provide nutrition, good, healthy, accessible nutrition to everyone in our community. We have our perennial garden to help with pollinization. It's a pollinating garden. It offers greater food production for us in the area. We have our raised beds for accessibility. The Lions Club helped to pay for our raised beds for people living with mobility issues. So it's a smaller plot, $20. And then we have a 10 by 20, a 20 by 20, and a 30 by 20 plot. And each of those are like $30, $45, $60. And if we could predict that we would have between 250 and 400 pounds of produce coming out of a garden bed for $30 or $60, that's a pretty good rate of return for your efforts and your money. In our initial pilot project, we asked for surveys. We survey every year. And so one of the lessons that came out of that was a woman said to us in her survey, "Don't presume because I have a car that I don't live with food security issues." And it was a really good note for us to remember that when we come to the garden, the shed, the greenhouse, the tools, everybody walks in and has exactly what they need to be successful in the garden. You can't tell who's got concerns around food security issues. We're just here growing food. There's a good community relationship and asking for help, or why do your tomatoes look so good? Mine needs some help. We've had feedback from gardeners about physical exercise, their mental health. And those are our goals in the garden too, is not just to address food security, but to look at overall health and well-being in our community. It's like walking into paradise. It's like a small community when you see all the paths are in between the garden beds are all in straw, and their neighbors are putting up little flags that say, "Welcome gnome," and there's a little gnome with a silly hat on it. There's just a real sense of belonging. Our fundamental needs are absolutely met in this area. And we've had tremendous support from funders and grantors to put in an outdoor classroom and run a child's education program, gardening program. It's just a happy place. It feels good to be here. I've gardened, my husband's a farmer, and I come here and I learn. And I can ask questions, and we can share our resources, our cultural traditions around food. We can share recipes, we can share our knowledge, and it just becomes a place of support and security. I think that if we looked at food security across Manitoba, we would want to look at this model. If I had to give advice, I would say get organized. And by that I mean work with your RM or your town councils. 10,000 pounds or 20,000 pounds of produce coming out of a garden into the community means that kids are going to school with food in their lunches, or kids are growing up with the nutrition they need for proper brain and physical development. A healthy community is going to be a rich community in so many different ways. All of this goes towards making sure that everybody has their basic fundamental right of food, accessible food.
Leslie Wakeman is a founding member of Lac du Bonny's Community Garden Committee, and you can read this story on our website, cbc.ca/Manitoba.
dark rolls in, when your body's bruised and you just can't win, when you scream out loud but you have no voice, you had a drink, now you have a choice. Remember your name, remember where you came from, touch your skin, touch your face, raise your head, take your place in the cold hard rain. Remember your name, when you're lying there on the bathroom floor, just crying to God you can't take no more, can't look yourself in the goddamn mirror, and you hope to hell you disappear. Remember your name, remember where you came from, touch your skin, touch your face, raise your head, take your place in the cold hard rain. Remember your name, remember the ones that came before you. Remember their strength will restore you. Remember when you've gone so far and forgot who you are. Remember. Remember your name, remember where you came from, touch your skin, touch your face, raise your head, take your place in the cold hard rain. Remember your name, remember your name, remember your name.
That was Manitoba's Desiree Dorian with Remember Your Name. Her new EP of the same name is available now, just coming up to 27 minutes after 12 o'clock. So have you been finding ladybugs flying around your home or hanging around outside? I've had them like dropping on my head, getting squished in my book. And if I've squished them, they smell really weird. But are they ladybugs? But are they really Asian lady beetles? Right now, the ladybug look-alike is in search of a warm place like your home to spend its winter. Robert Johns is a forest insect ecologist for the Canadian Forest Service, and here he explains what they are and why they're taking over from our domestic bugs.
They look indistinguishable unless you know what you're looking for. It's actually a predator. It's from another country, and it was brought in as a biocontrol agent for aphids. This was back in the 70s, and it's been very effective. Like it is a predator of aphids and other things, but unfortunately, because it's a very strong competitor, and it also releases toxins that prevent predators, like local predators like birds and stuff, that they don't like eating it because it tastes really bad. And so they've just proliferated since then. And so you end up with unusual numbers. And I think most people listening to this probably have had the experience of them crawling into their house as this time of year, which is very characteristic. They're in my house at the moment as well, and sort of conglomerating there, and then they'll notice them again probably in the spring. There are multiple species that are native to North America, native to the East Coast. They're very low abundances right now because this Asian lady beetle is so prolific. The biggest thing for them is that most birds, what they do, so when they get threatened, what these insects do is they release this toxin, comes out of like the elbow joints and other parts of their body. They just release it. It's not toxic, but it just tastes really bad. And so any kind of the birds, which would typically be the things that would eat them, they get it in their mouth and they basically spit it out. And what happens is those birds will not go back to that because birds are smart and they're not going to go back and eat ladybugs anymore. And so you end up with these ladybugs that are basically without predators affecting them. And because of that, what they end up doing is displacing other species that are native to here who don't have that same strength of that defensive sort of response.
Well, Robert Johns is a forest insect ecologist for the Canadian Forest Service, but maybe the birds won't be able to tell the icky ladybugs from the ones that taste okay, and all ladybugs will be safe and then take over the universe. That's what happens. You're listening to Radio Noon, and coming up after the news, we want you to call in. Whether it's shoplifting, vandalism, drug paraphernalia, or garbage, more than half of Manitoba businesses have been hit really hard by property crime this year. So coming up on our call-in conversation, we want to know, what do you think needs to happen to reverse the trend? What do you think the effect is on customers and the community? Tell us what's going on in your neighborhood. Have things changed? Are you shopping a little differently? Do you know what's behind this? Why is there so much vandalism? Why are Manitoba businesses being targeted? And who's doing this stuff? Give us a call, 204-780-0893 after the news. And the news is next.
This is CBC News. Good afternoon. I'm Rosanna Hempel. At 12:30, it's 11 in Winnipeg. A mix of sun and cloud today, a high of 15. Recognizing heroes after a tragedy. That's Elder Billy Scheibler singing the Buffalo song ahead of a group of 134 first responders being given Manitoba's highest honor, the Order of the Buffalo Hunt. The first responders rushed to help when there was a deadly bus crash near Carberry. 17 people died as a result of last year's crash in June. Premier Wab Kinew says he felt the need to recognize what they did after meeting many of them at a memorial for those who died.
And we had to do something public to acknowledge the significance of what you did. And so I hope that as you're on your own journeys to process and to heal and to reflect on what you have done to serve your fellow Manitobans, may this be some measure of encouragement and reassurance for you.
Those receiving the order include first responders from Carberry, Brandon, Neepawa, Shared Health, Stars Air Ambulance, and the RCMP. The head of Manitoba Harvest says national numbers on the increasing number of people depending on food banks is distressing but not surprising. Food Banks Canada says 2024 is shaping up to be a record year. Harvest Manitoba President and CEO Vince Barletta says they're seeing 50,000 people a month visiting food banks across the province. He says there's been a 122% increase in the number of food bank users since March 2020. Barletta says there are a number of changes he and other food bank heads want to see.
Affordable housing, to the idea of a grocery benefit for low-income Canadians, improved service for northern and remote First Nations communities, and continuing to grow a benefit for Canada's disability benefit and for those hundreds of thousands of people for whom disability is a life sentence to poverty.
Barletta says he's also seeing an increase in the number of working people using food banks. Now to some international news. Israeli airstrikes have pummeled the southern Lebanese port city of Tyre. Thick plumes of smoke were seen rising against the skyline of the UNESCO heritage city. There were reports of fires and widespread damage. Israel had issued a warning, and most of the residents had fled the area before the attacks. The Israeli military says it targeted weapons depots and military buildings of various Hezbollah units. And that is the CBC News from Winnipeg. Your next local CBC News is at 1:30.
Thank you, Rosanna.
You're welcome.
Now, Riley Lachuk, weather specialist, has joined me in the studio. Hi, Riley.
On another nice fall day.
After a very nice fall
gorgeous
day.
Weekend.
Yep.
Gorgeous weekend.
Yeah.
I will remind you
Mm-hmm.
that at this point last year, we had about 5 centimeters of snow on the ground in Winnipeg.
Did we really?
Yes, our first accumulating snow came on the 27th. We had for Halloween last year, by that point, about 3 to 5 centimeters on the ground in the city. So Just saying.
Yeah. Just makes it all the sweeter.
Exactly. And we aren't looking at any, at least in the immediate forecast, any accumulating snow for Winnipeg, but a bit of a different story the further north you go in Manitoba, which we'll get into. We're looking at a little bit of snow along the Hudson Bay coast and for far northern parts of the province. Temperatures right now, 12 degrees in Winnipeg, Steinbach, Sprague, 10s through the Westman region this hour, 2 degrees in Thompson, Churchill at -1. Mainly sunny skies through much of southern Manitoba. Bit of cloud here and there hanging around, but other than that, we're sitting pretty nice for late October for this time of the year. We do have an area of low pressure, though, over northeastern Saskatchewan, and what that is doing is spreading some snow through far northern parts of Manitoba, even as far east as Churchill into Gillam and Shamattawa. So we are looking at a little bit of accumulation in that part of the province as we get through the day today. And we're talking in the range for Churchill, for example, Shamattawa looking at maybe 2 to 4 centimeters of snow. Temperatures right on the freezing mark as well. So some of this could be falling as some rain or even some freezing rain through the afternoon hours. So just keep that in mind as we get through the rest of the day today. That snow does come in waves. So we're not talking about a steady snow throughout the day. On and off as we head into the evening hours. Even Thompson has the chance of picking up a few flurries through the overnight hours tonight. Other than that, we are mainly sunny for the rest of the afternoon for most of southern Manitoba. Bit of cloud hanging around, so I'm calling it a mix of sun and clouds toward a mainly sunny sky, somewhere in the middle there as we head through the rest of the day. Tomorrow, bit grayer. Tomorrow, what we have is an area of low pressure forming south of the border. This won't have a direct impact on our weather here in southern Manitoba, but certainly we're looking as we get into the midweek, maybe some rain through places like Fort Francis into Dryden into northwestern Ontario. This gives Manitoba a miss, aside from some of the cloud cover that we'll see as we head through Tuesday into Wednesday. Wednesday looks like by the time we get to the afternoon hours, back into a mainly sunny sky. Today, we're looking at 14, maybe could top 15 degrees through the Red River Valley this afternoon. I've got Winnipeg at 15 for the afternoon today. 16s through the Westman region. Could even get a 17 in Melita this afternoon. And we see some flurries. Temperatures closer to the freezing mark through parts of northern Manitoba. Gillam through the Churchill region in particular. 10 degrees for Winnipeg for Tuesday. I've got 5s and 6s for the rest of the work week, under a mix of sun and clouds generally through the rest of the week. And Saturday's looking mix of sun and clouds at this point in 9 degrees. So no snow in our forecast for the south, but the only precipitation we could see, at least in the south, into northwestern Ontario as we get into Tuesday and Wednesday.
Well, around here, it's been so nice. And last night, I guess it didn't even freeze because we have a bird bath outside our front window. We sit and have coffee.
Yep.
And if the birds are in there going bonk, 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 bonk with their beaks on the ice, or if they have their little skates on, those little scarves like in the Snoopy cartoons, then we know it's frozen in the night, but it didn't seem to be
We are looking as we get later into the week, temperatures closer or below that freezing mark through the early morning. But so far, I think we've been spoiled through fall.
I love it. You can never spoil a Manitoban. Thanks very much,
You're
Riley.
welcome.
That's weather specialist Riley Lachuk, and you can hear him this afternoon on Up to Speed. And, of course, you can see him on the CBC News at 6. You are listening to CBC Radio Noon. I'm Laurie Hoogstraten, and we want to talk today about crime against Manitoba businesses. Manitoba businesses have been hit hard by crime this past year. More than half report being the victim of crimes like theft, vandalism, and violence. And that's from a report released by the Canadian Federation of Independent Business. On top of that, nearly 8 in 10 businesses feel their tax dollars aren't being effectively spent on community safety. So what do you think needs to happen to reduce business and property crime? Are you a business person that's been a victim of crime? Have you witnessed a crime? Do you feel safe doing business in your community, or do you feel threatened wandering around your neighborhood? We want to hear from you. Give us a call at 204-780-0893, or you can text us at 204-588-7355. Brianna Solberg is with the CFIB, that's the Canadian Federation of Independent Business, and she's calling it, and this is a quote, "Nightmare on Main Street." Hello, Brianna.
Hello, thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. So why do you call it Nightmare on Main Street?
Well, by now we've certainly all heard stories about the impacts that crime and community safety challenges are having on our local small businesses. And I think for many of them, whether they've been the direct victim of a theft or vandalism or harassment, or they've simply witnessed it from neighboring shops, I think the problem's getting worse. And that's obvious from our data that 50% of Manitoba's small businesses have been impacted by this over the past year. And that's up 11% from the same time last year. So clearly things are escalating. And in many cases, these incidents are becoming more and more violent, which is extremely alarming. And yeah, it's becoming a bit of a nightmare.
So up 11% since last year. It's probably a silly question, but do these statistics tend to go up and down, or is this just been a steady rise?
I think it's been a steady rise, to be honest, post-pandemic, but up 11% is quite a significant jump. And it's not to say that this is exclusive to Manitoba. This is an issue that we're seeing across Canada, but the solutions are few and far between. We've not seen very many creative solutions to tackle this. And unfortunately, that's just the nature of the problem. It does not have an easy solution, but we need governments at all levels to work together, to collaborate, and to find some way to combat this issue. Otherwise, it will continue to get worse and worse.
Yeah, we're hoping maybe some of our listeners will have some solutions or suggestions. Give us a call at 204-780-0893 and tell us what you think is behind the rise in crime and what can be done to address it. And also let us know if you've noticed anything in your own neighborhood, good or bad, and tell us about it. 204-780-0893. So, Brianna, can you describe some of the main categories of crime, just more specifically than, crime against the businesses?
Yep. So the majority of businesses in Manitoba, 75% of them have been impacted by thefts. And second to that, 70% say vandalism. So whether that's broken window or graffiti, damage to the outside of their building. And then around a third say that they've been the victims of harassment, or their employees or customers have been the victims of harassment. So business owners are growing increasingly concerned about their own personal safety and the safety of their employees and their clients. So many are changing the way that they operate. They are keeping their doors locked during the day and only letting certain people in by appointment only, let's say, or they're changing their operating hours to open later and close earlier. They'll have multiple staff on at the same time so that they can hopefully keep each other safe. And many of them are spending a significant amount of money on security. So whether that's purchasing security cameras, hiring security personnel, putting up fences, new locks. We had the median business in Manitoba say they're spending $5,000 just to protect their business on an annual basis. And that's a significant cost,
of course,
especially at the time when businesses are facing inflationary pressures as it is and massive debt loads. It's becoming extremely costly.
Well, let's go to the phone lines and see what our listeners have to say. Give us a call, 204-780-0893. And we have Robin on the line. Hello, Robin.
Hi there.
What would you like to comment on?
I'm a small business person in Wolseley. I've seen the corner store Barchette's man chasing somebody out with stolen goods. Yes, he's put a doorbell on that allows him to open the door and make him safer. That's run of the course. That's a normal thing to do as a business owner. But my comment is housing first, housing first, housing first. People who have a hard time fall upon them. If they don't have family to put them up and take care of them and feed them, they're going to steal. The problem with crime is housing not being secure, food being too expensive. Number one, that needs to happen.
So people are desperate is what you're saying.
I believe so.
Yeah. Good point. Thank you, Robin.
Thank you.
What's your point of view out there in Radio Land? Give me a call, 204-780-0893. There's been a sharp rise in crimes against Manitoba businesses, and we're trying to dig deep and find out what is behind it, what's causing it, and how that can be turned around. So, Brianna, in your report, does that come up, the issue of people needing housing? and that's maybe driving them to crime?
Certainly, that's something to be considered by policymakers, and it's something we've recommended, that when we're looking at solutions to this issue, there are underlying social issues that are contributing to crime, housing, mental health, addictions, and these people do need to be connected with the supports that they need. Those supports need to be available as well. So we're calling on governments to make sure that those supports are in place. But it doesn't happen overnight, right? That's sort of a long-term issue. And in the meantime, the problem is very real, and business owners are the ones on the front lines of this. So they need more support in the short term, whether that's in the form of greater policing, better response times, I think, from police is something the majority of business owners would agree is necessary.
Mm-hmm. I must say, when you were talking about having to lock the doors and so on, from a customer point of view, and I'm sure the businesses must realize this too, if you think, oh, I'm just going to pop into this shop, and you go to open the door and it's locked, it sort of sets you back. And it also makes you feel, or at least I feel, when they come to open the doors, like, oh, sorry to bother you, that kind of thing. And it gives you that sense that things are not well. But it must be difficult for the retailers or the business people too, to have to, kind of almost vet their customers. It's not like just walking in and browsing and so on. You almost have to be sort of purpose driven when you have to like hammer on the door and make the proprietor come to the door. That must be difficult.
Yeah, it's certainly a deterrent. And we talked earlier about the cost that businesses are spending to secure their business, but that cost doesn't even account for the loss in revenues because of like the deterrence of simply having to open later, close earlier, keep your doors locked. It certainly does create a perception for customers that this perhaps is not a safe area that I should be patroning. And I think we need to do a better job across the province in our communities of not just having areas perceived to be safe, but making them actually safe. Yeah, exactly.
Well, let's return to the phone lines. Erica, good afternoon. Welcome to Radio Noon.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Pleasure. What would you like to say?
Well, I just wanted to pick up on the comments made about businesses wanting to have increasing police response times and having to increase security. I think one of the problems is that we have equated safety with security and policing in our society, when actually I think if we were able to do things like divert our business tax dollars to community safety responses that actually respond to the needs of the community in a specific area, we would be seeing really different property crime rates.
How would that work? What do you mean?
So this is the idea that the Winnipeg police budget, as it stands right now, has 26% of the overall budget of Winnipeg. And if police aren't even using that budget effectively to respond to these crimes that are on the rise and making people feel unsafe, then why couldn't we look at an alternative solution where we funnel money into the communities that are being most impacted, and then have those businesses be part of that solution, so that we could create belonging, respect, dignity among communities, and people could meet their basic needs more easily, and businesses could flourish instead of waiting for the police to arrive.
Interesting. I'll go to Brianna for a response. Thank you for calling, Erica.
Thanks. Take care. Bye.
Thanks. Brianna, is this something else you've considered?
Yeah, I think that the point she's making is a good one, and it's something that we have seen already starting to happen. The province's retail theft initiative, for example, is an initiative that assigns officers to specific areas of the city to help combat retail crime. And they've put more money into that, and that's to help basically combat overtime for the current police force that we have. They've put more money into that to better staff it, because the program does seem to be working in the areas where these kind of task forces are on the ground. It seems to be having an impact, and business owners feel like there is a level of safety. But I think it's also back to the point, right? This isn't an overnight solution. If we funnel money into certain areas of the city, or if we funnel area into mental health, addiction supports, and housing, that's great, of course, but it's a long-term solution, right? And in the interim, we still need to be funding boots on the ground all over the province, and making sure that response times are good.
Well, as you point out, the business owners running their businesses are frontline, and maybe things have changed by 11% in Winnipeg this year, it sounds like, to where they have to be on guard, be alert, and so on. So what is the most direct solution that the business owners want? Is it more visible security in the form of police walking by, or what what do you hear from the business owners themselves in terms of what they want done now, as opposed to, as you spoke, long-term solutions?
What they want now is better upkeep of public spaces, to make them clean and well maintained, so that they, it just helps deter crime if these areas are well maintained. And there's patrons that want to visit these areas because they feel clean and safe. And then, as I mentioned earlier, not just having them feel clean and safe, but actually making them safe. So having police officers present, so an increase in police presence and better response times is what business owners want in the interim.
Mm-hmm. What about insurance costs and so on? Are businesses responding to these crimes by putting in insurance claims, and are they covered, and what does that do to their insurance?
So what we hear from business owners is that they're shouldering the costs of replacing stolen goods when they are the victims of theft. They are shouldering the costs of replacing broken windows when they are the victims of vandalism, because they do not want to file insurance claims because they're worried that their already very expensive premiums will go up, and they simply can't afford it.
And are there particular businesses that are being hit more often than others?
Unfortunately, it happens to be those businesses who were hit hardest by the pandemic and its restrictions that are still trying to claw their way back and pay off their debt. Those in retail, hospitality, those service-based businesses, right? Those who see clients coming through the door every day. They're the ones who tend to be the victims of thefts, vandalism, harassment, loitering. And it's simply because they're the ones who want to be serving the community. Their doors are open for whoever wants to come inside, but lately they are feeling like they can trust their community less and less, which is really unfortunate.
Well, I wonder if this is affecting customers shopping too, if the business owners themselves are feeling unsafe. And this is what I'd like to ask people in listening to the radio right now at 204-780-0893. Do you tend to maybe shop in malls now, or things that are at least perceived to be safer, rather than wandering down the street to a little store that you used to go to? Because if things, if people start to perceive things as being difficult and dangerous, sometimes that's just the easier way out. And of course, that doesn't do the business owner any good. And can you give us some figures on just how much it's costing the business owners?
Well, we have the median number. So kind of in between the highs and lows is $5,000 on average that businesses are spending to up their security. And that's putting in security cameras, hiring security guards. But as I said, there are a lot of hidden costs here as well. The cost to replace broken windows, the cost to replace stolen goods, and businesses are shouldering those themselves because they don't want to file insurance claims. And I think there's that hidden cost to deterred consumers who don't want to go out and shop in certain areas of the city because they don't feel that it is safe. And that's really unfortunate. I know for myself personally, if I heard a story about a neighborhood where they were robbed, or, their staff was harassed, or a client was harassed while they were there, I'm not likely to go and shop in that area, or I would feel like I need to bring a friend along with me, which isn't always possible.
Yeah. Well, let's go back to the phone lines. We've just got a few minutes left, but hello, Aaron.
Yes, hello. I would like to make a comment about just, I'm not a retail owner. I don't own a store, but I have a feeling that, but I have at my home been impacted by theft, and I feel like it's repeat offenders that are contributing to this theft problem that we're having. And one of the solutions I think we should look at is, obviously, maybe we're not tough on the punishments maybe we got to look at longer jail times and things like that, so people are deterred from doing the things that they're doing in terms of theft. Is that something that's being looked at from a policy standpoint, and being just tougher on crime, I guess?
Well, thank you very much, Aaron. We'll go to Brianna with that. Thank you. Brianna, does your report measure things in that way, like who's committing these crimes, and are they repeat offenders, as Aaron pointed out?
Yeah, it's an excellent point, and that's one of our recommendations as well. We've been calling on governments for years in this area to improve the approach to handling repeat offenders and to have harsher bail rules, because Aaron's right. It's often the same individuals who get away with these crimes the first time that will try their luck again. And we have business owners who have told us that they have seen the same person come and steal from their shop because there's simply no recourse. And ultimately, I think this is a policy that lies with the federal government. So we've seen some provinces come out and call for harsher bail rules. Recently, Ontario came out and called on the federal government to have harsher penalties for repeat offenders. And I think it's something that's absolutely necessary to help combat this.
Well, it's been interesting talking to you, Brianna, because as you pointed out, there are long-term solutions and problems that are events because of poverty and people not having homes. And then there's the difficulties of the frontline workers, people with their businesses, and they're coming to work and finding their windows smashed and so on. And what's that doing for their own level of fear, let alone, loss of customers and revenue and so on. It's a big problem.
Absolutely. And I mean, as our report shows, it's a problem that's unfortunately getting worse. So small business owners are just looking for support. Like I said, from all levels of government, we need to have collaboration, and also from their community. I think it's important that people recognize that this is an extremely difficult time to be a business owner, and if at all possible, shop local when you can, and try and support those local small businesses who are on the front lines of this, and they're just doing their best to serve the community.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Brianna, for being with us. And thank you very much to all our listeners that called in. It's been an interesting discussion. Bye-bye.
Thanks for having me. Bye-bye.
Brianna Solberg is the director for the Prairies and the North for the Canadian Federation of Independent Business. You can read the full report, Broken Windows and Broken Trust, the Impact of Rising Crime on Small Business, on the CFIB's website.
New this month on CBC Gem, 2 of Canada's longest-running shows are back for their 18th seasons.
You're going to be introduced to a new world.
Murdoch Mysteries brings more intrigue and invention as Detective Murdoch faces new challenges.
I would say it's extremely bad form to arrest your new boss.
And over at Heartland, life on the ranch rolls along at a more relaxed pace.
Looks like Stetson's back to his old self.
Season 18 of Murdoch Mysteries and Heartland. Watch free on CBC Gem.
You're listening to Radio Noon for just a couple more minutes. And then coming up later, it's Up to Speed. And host Faith Fundal is with me in the studio. Hi, Faith.
Hello, Lori. The annual Food Banks Canada report was released today. And as you've been hearing, folks have been hearing, food bank use is on the rise. We'll hear more from Harvest Manitoba, the CEO, who says it's not surprising. But we'll also check in with a local food bank about what they're seeing in terms of the use and how the demographics have changed. So we'll have that conversation on the show this afternoon.
Thank you. People are thinking very creatively about this huge problem. Yeah, thank you very much, Faith.
Thank you.
That's Up to Speed host Faith Fundal. You can hear them this afternoon from 3 to 6 on CBC Radio 1. Just time to say thank you very much to Marshall Hodgins, our technician, to Wendy Parker, our director, and to Kevin Nipatebo, who's got the YouTube thing going on. It's the live screen. How's my hair? Oh, terrible as usual. Never mind. That's visuals for you. I'm Laurie Hugstradden. I'll be with you again tomorrow. It's been a pleasure being here with you on Radio Noon. Enjoy the summery October day. Bye.